for joining me. In this final edition of Purple Points, I have a very, very special guest, and I'm pleased to have her with me. Joining Purple Points today is Yolanda Gotier. She is a practicing psychotherapist. She is the executive director of Alternatives to Family Violence in Adams County. She is also an Ifa priestess of Oshun, and she is my mother. So, Miss Gotier, I'd like to thank you for joining Purple Points. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So my standard intro question is, what comes to mind when you think of the color purple?
When I think of the color purple, I think about the book, I think about the film, definitely the way in which the film was brought to the screen, because it's so vastly different than the book. And the fact that we have someone bringing to the screen our story, and just, you know, I to this day wonder why and how he decided to tell our story in the way that he did.
Okay, and by he, you're thinking of Spielberg, the director of the film?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
It's all right. So my question, and I've kind of alluded to this throughout various interviews, is that I remember my first experience with the film was going to the movies with you. And I remember we saw it more than once with different friends of yours. So I've always wanted to ask, what was it about this film that resonated so much so that we went back? And if my memory serves, I think we went 3 times to see this film. What was it about this film that was so important that, you know, we went and then we took different friends of yours, and there were conversations where there were tears, there were anger, there was joy. So if you could talk to me a little bit about that.
First of all, it was one of those unique opportunities to hear a story in a way that was different from the book that I had read. Just the actors that were a part of this story was also very different. You know, here is Oprah, who was coming into her own, and Whoopi Goldberg, and just to see them in a film and wondering, well, can Oprah act? And, you know, just so many questions, so many basic questions that really had very little to do with the time, but it was just, can Oprah act? And will she and Whoopi make a good will they be compatible in this film? And then, well, there's Danny Glover. Now, what's he going to do? The idea that there were so many Black people playing such pivotal, important roles was also another piece of it. They weren't somebody's, you know, as Sophia says, no, they weren't somebody's maid, and they weren't in the background. They weren't getting killed in the first 6 minutes of the film, and they weren't running around being drug addicts, and it just was, here we have Black people in a positive light. Now, the story itself may not have been, in each scene, it may not have been positive, rosy Pollyanna, but we have Black people who are living a life that may not be our personal experiences, but is a collective, a cumulative experience of our Black psyche, of those pieces of us that we know about. That some of us know about from an experiential level, but others of us know about it on a cellular level. That while this didn't happen to me personally, somewhere in my genetic DNA, somewhere in my genetic biorope, something like this has happened to someone in my family. And maybe I don't know exactly who it was, but maybe it was not my blood relationships, but it may have been a part of my fictive kin in which this story has come about, has resonated, has been a part of our family. I think the other part about seeing it, for me, oftentimes when a movie is this impactful, I want to see it more than once. So I would have to clearly say that while I saw it that many times, I certainly have seen other movies many, many times. And a part of that is, did I miss something? Because each time I went, I found something different, some other aspect of the film that I hadn't thought about, that I hadn't really looked at and wondered, well, now I know they didn't change it. How did I miss this the last 3 or 4 times that I've seen it? And since that time, I probably have seen it at least 20 times since then. I often use this when I'm working with women, and I use it when I work with, not just with women of color, but when I'm doing domestic violence groups or when I'm doing sexual assault groups. I will use this film, because I think that Celie's story can be, for lack of a better descriptor, every woman's story. On some level, each one of these female characters tells a story that women know, that women know. It's an internal knowing. It's not only an intellectual knowing, but it's a story. It's a woman's story that the characters happen to be Black. They just happen to be Black, but it is our story. I mean, and they bring their own, because they are Black, they bring their own essence of their Blackness, their experience of being Black, their experience of being Black women in a time and a place where many Blacks were very successful and successful financially. And there is this myth that in our history that Black people have always been poor. Black people have not been educated, that Black people cannot be seen as intellectual, that we aren't seen as having our own cities, our own towns, our own stores, our own personal makeup that makes us who we are.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I was ready for the weight of that answer as a kid when we did see it, but I do appreciate all of those things that make up why we saw it. And, I think that may factor into, my appreciation for cinema, just being able to see and pay attention for different things. And then obviously as a film going audience, if you see the same movie more than once, you're growing. You may be in a different emotional space than the first time you saw it. So there are all these things that you can pick up from the film. So, I mean, I think that what you're saying really speaks to the way that the film resonated and resonates with audiences now. It's still going strong. And everyone that I've talked to in the interview, they've seen it 20, 30 times. So, there's something significant about this film. So, one of the things I was interested in, and it, something that I think really speaks to some of my other questions that I really want to ask is there's this backlash against the film when it comes out in 1985. And it seems to really center on this idea that Black men are demonized. And it's almost at the expense of, like you said, Alice Walker telling this story through the lens of Spielberg and Hollywood's apparatus. But I'm wondering if you could talk to why you think there was such a strong reaction, and it tended to be on this gender plane. So it's men against women and Black women against Black men, just basically because of some of the images in this story.
Well, I think at the time, we're looking at how we bring together Black men and Black women, and why it is important that Black men and Black women are seen one way. And what that creates for us is this one-dimensional relationship that we can have. It also speaks to what a majority of people tend to believe that Black men are, that they are demons, that they don't have a true sense of self that would prevent them from being abusive, that would prevent them from doing mean, cruel, and evil things. So I think it does a disservice to Black men and Black African-American female and male relationships when we create a script that says men can only be this or they can be that. They can either be all good, or they have to be all bad. And I think that in all of our elements of society, we draw upon that from which we see, and we can become what we see, and we can also work diligently to not be what we see. And it's about what's in our social environment. So I don't necessarily have this sense that for me it did not demonize Black men. It just showed a side of Black men. But it also, when we demonize, we don't allow that individual to be able to redeem themselves. When we say it's either this or it's that. As we know in life, nothing is all or nothing. There are varying shades of gray. And when we're looking for our answers, if we look at the extreme ends of yes, it is, or no, it isn't, we miss all of the beauty and the information that's in the middle. Mm-hmm. That helps us to create our images, that helps us to solidify what we believe answers are, or how we see people. If I only, there is that sort of thing that people tell you when you're going to interview for a job. You only have so many seconds to make a first impression, and that first impressions are made before you open your mouth. If I only lived with my first impressions of individuals, I would have missed out on the beauty of knowing so many powerful people. Mm. And so if I only demonize the men and I hold the women up as weak who later became strong, I miss out on the essence of knowing who they were, and knowing what they brought, and knowing what their gift was, knowing what their purpose was.
Mm-hmm. You're raising some things that I'd like to ask just in terms of the gray area. And I wanted to tap into your expertise. I know that you work with women and other survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And so, the film obviously brings up these issues. We see the gambit of issues. We see the intimate partner violence. We see incest. We see rape. I mean, we see all of these narratives around what's happening inside these homes. And so what I wanted to do was to kind of talk about the reality of what the film brings up. So one of the things that I'm really curious about is what are factors that might create the atmosphere for those things to occur. So, for example, in the film, we see Celie's stepfather, who she, has a child with, and it's not the first child. How do these things happen? And I know one thing is the film, but obviously these things do happen in real life. So I'm kind of interested in, how does this happen?
Okay, so when you think about the film, definitely Spielberg took the hot points from the book. Because of course it wasn't just the film that was raising social consciousness. He wanted to make money. Right. The actors, of course, wanted to see that the film made money as well. That it became it became not necessarily a popular film, but a film that was well watched. Mm-hmm. A film that that changed lives. I mean, because with cinema, we do change lives. And so it becomes really important that we have those moments in our life where if we happen to be the person who is producing the film, that it is life-changing for them, but also life-changing for us. I think when you're talking about when we're looking at her father, there has been a belief that as long as that child is not my blood relative, is not related to me by blood, then that's not my child. And this sense of, as I justify my behavior, I can do different things when we're not blood related. Mm-hmm. Now, does that make sense? Does that happen all of the time? It doesn't. But there are those instances in which that has occurred. It wasn't just during the time that The Color Purple was written. It still happens today. I've had a recent experience in hearing that type of information, where this gentleman was not the daughter's blood father, and he felt justified, and that it was not rape, and that she offered herself to him. So when we're talking about this man, this was a man that on many levels lived by his own code of behavior. Not only did he sexually abuse his stepdaughter, not only did he impregnate her twice, but he justified that by the mere fact that her mother was ill all of the time and could not perform her wifely duties. So somebody had to do it, and he wasn't going to go outside of his home and have another woman or cheat on his wife who was very ill. There's also this whole sense of how things that belong to women didn't really belong to women. I mean, when we talk about the money that was in Celie's family before she went to live with Mr., all of that belonged to her mother. She had no idea that the home, the property, the store, the way in which this man dominated over them as though everything belonged to him. They didn't have a clue that this was as a result of their mother. And so when he violated them economically as an entire family by saying, this is mine, this is important, you have to do what I want you to do, I'm the head of this household. If you don't do what I say, you won't be here. How do you tell a 10-year-old child, if you don't give me what I want, you'll be out in the street? And essentially, that was what he was doing, threatening. And when you look at Celie's piece in all of this as a young child, if she felt, if I do this, then he won't touch my sister. So not only was she sacrificing herself, but she was also being a protector. And so when we look at his role, it often makes me wonder what happened early in his life that made this behavior okay for him. And did he really even think it was truly okay? At which point did he just call it something else and cease to see Celie? She just was this body, but what did he cease to see her as a person?
Right, that's a good point. Yeah, and I'm, just kind of going back and forth from the film to reality. There's a strong perception that Black people don't get therapy, or that they shouldn't, or they're encouraged by their family members that if things like this happen, you don't say anything because we don't do that. So, I mean, I guess I've asked a couple questions, but, why is there this perception that we don't need therapy? Particularly if you are, let's say you're raised in the Christian tradition and you go to church and you talk to your pastor or you pray. And there's a myth in some churches that people who believe and have faith in God, they don't need therapy. They don't get depressed. They don't have these problems. So why is there this perception? And I know that there obviously are Black people who do get therapy. So could you talk about, one, why there's this myth, and then speak to the fact that there are Black folk who do get therapy?
Well, I think a part of that has to do with how we wound up in this country. And some of us came as slaves, some of us came as freedmen and women, and who we trusted ourselves to confide in. Because when you think about therapy can happen in many different ways. It isn't necessarily that it's always clinical. For some people, going to church is therapy. For some people, they can go to church, but it isn't the message from the minister. It's the singing of the choir. It's the social, being in that social atmosphere. For some, it's dancing, taking an African dance class and feeling the rhythm of the drums that just that wraps around your heart and soothes your soul, putting your feet on the ground and touching that Mother Earth. That's therapy. For many of us, it's now about how we're choosing to eat and eating green and healthy foods, live foods. That's therapy. And so when we talk about our therapy, we have to look at it from a standpoint of, am I mentally ready? Am I financially ready? Am I doing the things I need to do to get me ready? And who do I trust enough to confide my innermost details with? Who do I trust not to know that before I get up and walk out of this office, 3 people in my community are going to know that I've been here, and they're going to know everything that I said. It's having, at one point, when I went to Ghana, I had the opportunity to visit a mental health facility while I was there. And the actual person who was head of the psychiatric department actually lived on the grounds. And at the time, he had just come back home and he had gotten 2 PhDs, and people wanted to celebrate, and they wanted to celebrate where he lived. Well, here, we wouldn't think of having a big party with food and music and dancing and drumming and laughter, and we wouldn't think of having that on the grounds of a mental health facility. But that was where he lived, and that's where the party was. And as individual people dropped by, we didn't know, at one point, we didn't know that the people who left early were actually patients of the facility.
Mm-hmm.
They were just there to wish the doctor, to welcome him back home and wish him well. Now, here we would say we don't mix that, that it's unprofessional, it's unethical to do that. He did not introduce these people to us as these are the patients, the inpatients from this facility. He didn't introduce us at all. He didn't keep them out. They came, they were gracious, they said hello, they greeted him, congratulated him, got something to eat, and left. And so when you look at how we operate, sometimes when we're doing our mental health work, our therapeutic work, it is about our communities are so small that while you may not know my family directly, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna know somebody I know.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you share that? So I think that's a part of it, is who do I share my innermost details with? Who do I trust to share that with? And I firmly believe that when it gets too painful, we figure out a way to let somebody know.
Mm-hmm.
And that it is important that we are talking about our own mental health. I know that there is a school of thought amongst some people around therapy. I'm not telling all those people my business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not airing my dirty laundry. I mean, there are a lot of things that you learn as a child in a family. We don't tell other people our family business. Our family business stays here. We don't take it out in the street. You don't air your dirty laundry in the street. And so as a small child, you hear that and you hear that and you hear that. And then as an adult, you begin to think, I guess I can't talk about this.
Mm.
And then what happens when, in the case of Celie, what happens, who did she tell? Who was there to tell? You know, we don't hear about her mother having friends. We don't hear about the church people coming to her home to bring them food, to comb their hair,
Mm-hmm.
to do anything for them. We don't hear about that piece. Now that doesn't mean that they didn't do it, but we don't see that in the film.
No.
We don't see this outpouring from the community to say these young girls have a mother who is terminally ill and we need to help them. We don't hear an outcry that goes up because here's this young girl who's not even 13 who's now had 2 children. We don't hear anybody coming in saying, how is this happening? So when we're talking about therapy for ourselves, therapy makes you vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say to especially to young children when I'm working with them, when things are bad, there is more space on the outside that it can fill up as you talk about it. And it leaves your heart free to do many things when you're able to talk about the things that have a hold on your heart. Mm. And so, it's often funny because I get the little thing from the kids. My mama said, I can't tell you about this, but you know what happened, Miss Yolanda? And I hear about it anyway. Mm-hmm. But they don't think they've told about it. They think they're telling something totally different. Or I've had kids who say, my mom says I can't tell you, and they list off all the things their mother or their father has said they can't share. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they told you couldn't tell me about them, but now I have all this information. What am I to do with that information? And when I'm seeing children, I make it very clear to their parents. We will discuss it, and we will discuss it with your child in the room, because I believe those children have the right to be able to have that place that they can come to and say, this is where I feel safe. Because that's another factor of therapy. We have to be able to feel safe when we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And our connection in therapy, it really, that connection happens. Yes, it happens on an intellectual level, but it also happens on a very cellular level. How can I connect with this person who I am sharing this information with? Because a therapist can't do anything if the person doesn't share, if the person doesn't give information. I mean, I certainly can read tons of books and go to this seminar after another seminar. And if I don't have any clients, what good is that information for me? Mm-hmm. So I think it is a myth that we as Black people, as African American people, as Afro-Caribbean people, as African people, I think it is a myth that we don't go to therapy. I think we avail ourselves of therapeutic intervention on many, many levels. And going to talk therapy, as one of my kids calls it, going to talk therapy and laying on a couch, because that's what they do on TV. Mm-hmm. We're gonna lay on a couch and we're gonna talk. I think when we talk with our friends, when we, as women, when women get together and they talk, that's therapeutic. And what we want is somebody that's not just gonna jump up and say, girl, if that was me, I would have done. Mm-hmm. When it's all said and done, we don't really know what we would have done if that had been us. We don't know what we would have done if we had been in Celie's position. We don't know the extent of the threats that he made towards her. I'm going to kill your mother, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to hurt your sister, I'll do this to your sister. We don't know. And when you are a young child and some adult tells you that, and you've been taught that adults are there to protect you and to save you, and that you should always do what adults tell you to do, what do? You do that. Mm-hmm. So we can call that old school adult-child interaction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a lot different now in some households, but I think your point is well made that there are these therapeutic interventions. And we even see it in the film with Celie, with Suge, the sister circle that is The Color Purple, whether it's Celie giving Suge a bath, or it's them sitting around the table talking, or towards the end of the film when she's, getting them fitted for pants, those moments where you do see there are these therapeutic interventions. And then, I think the discovery of the letters, and then of course the scene that everybody likes, the thanks taken scene where they're sitting around and she says, hey, I've had enough. And, I'm in a position where I can speak my truth. So there are some really powerful moments in the film. And, I think that's one of the things that I've learned about the film is just how those small moments can really have an impact on someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so even beyond the film, I'm wondering, how does someone, because intimate partner violence is a huge issue. And unfortunately, in our reality, is something that's still going on. I remember thinking back to the O.J. Simpson case, and everybody was fixated on black or white. How will this divide the races? Did he do it? Did he not do it? But one of the things that was really clear was there was intimate partner violence.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the discourse was not on intimate partner violence. When we think about, contemporary issues, such as Chris Brown and Rihanna. Oh, she's crazy, that she's wild, she's from the Caribbean, you know how that is. She probably provoked it. But there's no conversation around this happened. This is assault, and this happened. And we can love Chris Brown, we can like his music, but there still needs to be a conversation around that. Or even, most infamously, the Bill Cosby situation. We still need to have a conversation about intimate partner violence and the impact that it has. Because I think the fallout from the Cosby Show is that, how do you watch the Cosby Show knowing that Heathcliff, aka Bill, is accused of violently assaulting women? So can you still enjoy the Cosby Show and see Theo and Vanessa and, overlook that? And do we hold him accountable and then not hold other entertainers accountable who've done similar kinds of things or worse? So, I think of The Color Purple in some instances as this opening of the way in a lot of these conversations. So, part of, I guess, what I'm asking at this point is, how do we move to where we're not silent about these issues? And what can we do to try and, ensure that these instances don't happen as much as that's possible, if it is possible?
Well, I think I'll start at the last one, is what can we do? It really is about talking about the issue. When we're teaching our children about good touch, bad touch, we need to teach our children about good touch, bad touch in our family. And for some of us, when we talk about it, it brings up unresolved issues of events that may have happened in our life, things that we cannot talk about. And so it then becomes really important for us to be in touch with, I can't even talk to my child about this because I'm still angry. I am still walking wounded because of these issues that occurred for me, and there was nobody to believe me. And because I work with both child survivors and adult survivors of sexual assault, it's always really interesting when children talk about, I just needed somebody to believe me. And then to hear adult women say, there was nobody who believed me. I told my mother, and I wanted something to happen. And most children, what they want to happen is to have the abusive acts. They want those to stop. They're not saying, let's destroy our entire family, let's send him away, I want him to do 20 to life. Children typically don't say that. What they want is for the bad stuff to stop, to not happen anymore. And when we have not, as adults, when we have not resolved our childhood issues, they don't go away. We're stuck at that point, and we continue to be stuck at that point, and we operate from that point. So can we stop it? What can we do as adults? Those are the things we can do for our children, making sure that they know about sexual assault, making sure they know it's not okay, making sure that we are open and available to them, and that if I couldn't do it, let me find somebody else who can. We don't have to keep this in our family. It's like we say for children, don't tell so-and-so anything because they can't keep a secret. And with with the holidays coming up, and for those who celebrate Christmas, uh, we need to go get mommy a Christmas gift. But remember, you can't tell. What is the first thing that child said? We went to buy you a present, and guess what? I can't tell you what it is. And and you're, as the adult who's with them, you're trying to shake your head or whatever, but this child has been entrusted with this secret. And so it really is also about not holding secrets that are devastating to our family makeup, that cripple us. And so I think those are things that we can do. And the other part is healing ourselves. As
Hmm.
adults, healing ourselves. What purpose does it serve for me to be angry with my mother for 50 years? For me to say I can never be at a family gathering because Uncle JoJo's going to be there, and I know what he did to me when I was 10, and I'm 60 now.
Hmm.
Uncle JoJo's still around. Or for people to collude, but they wouldn't say that they were colluding. But for them to collude and say, now remember, we can't leave the kids alone with Grandpa so and so, and not really telling everybody in the family, Grandpa Joe was sexually abusive to each of us. And we don't want that to happen to our children, or thinking that he's old now, so he won't do anything.
Hmm.
So it becomes important for us as families to be able to speak the truth about our families. And we are made up of many things in a family. And we want our family patterns, we want our history to be changed, we want our histories to be healed. We can't do that if we don't talk about it. We can't walk around believing that whatever is done in the cover of nightness and darkness never appears during the day. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. I mean, so it's the truth is in the vulnerability, and we have to talk about it. Is what I'm taking away. And you see that in the book, but you don't actually get to see as much of it in the film. And I
Hmm.
think that that was probably one of the more powerful moments in the book is that you see Mister, um, he's healing, and even though his narrative, at least for me, is not the most important narrative in the story, it does offer redemption, and it kind of makes your point that instead of demonizing him as this evil, horrible man who should be burned and thrown off a gasoline cliff or whatever, you begin to realize in his story there's some abuse there,
Hmm.
and it sort of speaks to the idea that many people who are committing these inhumane acts are people who've actually survived these inhumane acts, who haven't healed, and so they're acting out of that hurt. So I think when he and Celie are able to reconcile, and he's able to heal in his own space, that he's able to see how he's been her tormentor, and he attempts to rectify it to some degree.
Hmm.
So I think one of the powerful moments in the book was when they were able to do that, and I think in some ways that gives us a little insight of what communities can do, because maybe Uncle whoever he is a pedophile, but if he can get some help, if the family stops keeping secrets and says, yeah, that happened to me when I was your age, it happened to cousin whoever when she was that age, so we need to sit down, we need to talk, and I think that that's a very valid point. So one of the things that I wanted to sort of ask you is, I know you've seen the film numerous times and you've also seen the play, right?
Yes.
So looking at the play, looking at the film, and the book, obviously, how well do you think the film and the play do in telling the story that Alice Walker originally penned?
Now that's difficult. Um, the play and the movie, um, from utilitarian point of view, they can only fit into so much time.
Right.
And so you have to pick. I think with the play, what was chosen were the most popular pieces from the movie. The things that people who had seen the movie would, oh, I can recite that line, or I know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
The sister circle, but it doesn't really show how those sister circles develop. It took some of the most poignant and some of the more popular pieces from the film when I saw the play. I mean, definitely the music was nice.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the music, it was done in such a way that it did not distract from the play. And sometimes music can distract when there isn't a quality script written.
Mm-hmm.
But they both the film and the play had a good foundation, because Alice Walker wrote a very compelling story. And so if we look at it as foundation building, she built a very strong foundation by which other stories could develop, other people could tell their stories. Her story, we don't lose sight of her story because the film came out and didn't depict all the things that might have been your favorite part in the book. We don't lose sight of what might have been your favorite part in the film that didn't translate to the play. We don't lose sight of that. For the most part, when I went to see the play, the individuals that I had gone to the play with, they'd read the book, they'd seen the film.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a good foundation of what needed to be there.
Right.
It's that subtext that Alice Walker was able to convey in the book that allowed us to understand the film. That subtext that allowed us to understand the play. If we had never read the book or never seen the film, we would still know the story.
Mm-hmm.
We would still be able to relate to the story.
Absolutely. It's a good point. It's a very good point. And, I really appreciate you sitting down with us here at Purple Points and sharing some of these insights. And, some of the parallels between real life and the movie are really interesting. And so, being that this is the final interview of Purple Points here in December, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing home a lot of these insights. And I wanted to close with, is there anything that you'd like to share that maybe I didn't ask that you feel like is a good point to close out this series on? I'll give you the last word on that.
Definitely. If you are in need of having to speak to someone about something that's happened in your life, go and seek out a therapist. Interview your therapist. Don't just take the first one because that's what your insurance will pay, or this is all I can afford right now. Find that person that you can trust, because these are your innermost details of your life. This is your life that is unfolding before someone else. This is your life that you want to change, to make those changes. Don't walk around being wounded. We are not at our best when we walk around wounded and we're bleeding. We're internally bleeding and trying to put on this air of I'm okay. So I would certainly stress that people should definitely get therapy. That therapy is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That therapy is a healing thing, and that we need to get it as often as we can. The other things that I think that I would say about it is, if you've only seen the film, read the book. Because a film, as much as we want it to, it can't say everything.
Mm-hmm.
If it could, we wouldn't have sequels like Star Wars. How many Star Wars films are there? We wouldn't have the prequel. We wouldn't have the sequels. We wouldn't know the story. So each time we watch a Star Wars movie, we hear of a new Star Wars movie, we're being brought into the story. We're learning more and more about this other world, these other people, how they've come to be. We're finding out more and more about their characters. We're finding these creative pieces about these individuals who have inhabited their world.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if we had gotten everything we wanted from The Color Purple, who knows? We might be on Color Purple number 25 to really go in depth. So if all you've seen is the film, or you've only been to the play, read the book. It's always a good starting place. And written word is accessible on so many levels. But read the book. Read it on your tablet. Read it on your phone. Hold the actual paper copy and flip the pages. And there are always editions of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to your city, if it comes to your city, or you have the occasion to see the play, do that. Do your own comparison, because I think in and of itself, all of those medias they're healing in themselves. They're healing for our people. The Color Purple can be a healing tool for our people. And I think as one other thing that I would say is that when we talk about Mr.'s redemption, that, you know, I don't think I thought about it until just a few moments ago, that when he goes to help Celie is a part of his healing also. Because, you know, initially he didn't want Celie.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And he was denied her sister. And so what was the hurt that happened for him at not being able to get what he wanted? So was this also a way for him to make up to Nettie for kicking her out?
Mm-hmm.
Because he couldn't have her. So if he couldn't have her, nobody could have her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we ever talk about that piece of it.
Right. That's a good point.
So in this redemption, it was his redemption. It was his way to say, I could have loved her. I could have wanted her. I could have been her husband, but that didn't happen. And so I'm going to let that hurt and pain go. And I am going to be able to share her with others. I'm going to be able to share what I could not have with others. So I think that redemptive piece for him was on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
And that once we step outside of him being a one-dimensional person and we see all of who he brings, it allows us to help him move to redemption, because in his redemption, we are also redeemed.
Mm. And that's a eloquent way to end Purple Points. So I thank you for joining us. And I thank all of you out there who are listening and watching for being a part of this project. Thank you.
You're welcome.